Can I open for questions? Jack.
Patrick, have you delivered the essence of this speech to any Catholic universities or the administrators and such, or trustees and such?
I've not had time since about 5 a.m. this morning when I finished writing it. Yeah, you know, I should have acknowledged this from the outset. I'm not a Newman scholar, and you know, I came to this the way, I guess, the way God works in pulling people into things. I came to this work out of my experience as a student at a Catholic institution and meeting several young graduates of Catholic institutions who had similar experiences, and my learning curve has, you know, continues. And my focus on Newman has really just been in the past year with the beatification coming up, and it's opened my eyes as well as yours. So I appreciate, you know, the enthusiasm, but these are Newman's arguments.
Words that you know, compiled and put together in the speech. All those thoughts, of course, were running through your mind.
Yes.
All these many months and years. But is there enough? Let's say, have you been invited by any schools to say some things along the lines that you said?
Yeah, we have an active dialogue with schools. Some have shut off dialogue with me, asking me to exercise my demons. But yes, but we do. But certainly just this year, just to answer your question, we launched a new division of the Cardinal Newman Society called the Newman Legacy Project, and we're very enthusiastic about making a much more concerted effort to get Newman's ideas across to Catholic colleges and universities particularly, but also to the general public widely.
Educators, university administrators, has there into their whole sense of fear because of the relativism that is activated our culture and certainly something you were saying.
The question, can we say that? I'm sorry, have you finished? No, the question is whether administrators in Catholic colleges have any sort of fear based on the moral relativism that is increasingly part of Catholic university life and culture, or life and culture in general.
You know, being younger than most, especially most of the people I deal with, I definitely see a real generational thing here and situation. And you know, whereas there was what I would characterize as a wild swing away from what were perceived, perhaps very rightly, to be the excesses of dogmatism and a purely intellectual understanding of the faith that didn't embrace, you know, the reality of Christ's love and all of that. So we had the charismatic movement, and we had, you know, what would today be characterized as the liberal movement, but not as Newman explained it. You know, whereas that was probably a legitimate response, but I think wildly overreached in my view. Now there's a sense of, wait a second, we have to recapture the fact that the faith is intellectual, the faith is, you know, we can assent to it by our mind as well as our hearts. And that's what's going on here. And I think increasingly Catholic college leaders are starting to realize that the very movement away from the intellectual faith that they embraced was actually the demise of Catholic universities. And I think now they're starting to see that this is an opportunity. Pope John Paul II and Pope Benedict are both university popes, and they both were professors for years before becoming pope. And in fact, Pope Benedict, I don't have the quote in front of me, but Pope Benedict actually, when he described his motto for his papacy, noted that the job as Pope is, in many respects, very similar to his lifelong career as a professor, teaching the truth. And so, I hope I'm answering answering your question. I do what I don't know about fear. I don't know what's inside their heads, but what I do know is that there's increasingly, very clearly, increasing attention to the Catholic identity of Catholic colleges and universities, and it's a very hopeful movement. Yes. Relativism, yes, and I think that's what happened is that reaction against the strictness and the blandness that was perceived in the Catholic Church has fallen into, in many cases, a relativism that does what Newman described as relegating faith to a personal thing that you cannot intellectually assent to, and he would argue that the movement now is in a good direction. So yes.
Yes, I just like to go on what the gentleman in the last session talked about, and that is that it seems to me that American Catholics are torn on the one hand between a real commitment to liberal democracy and the separation of the church and state in a society where we have done so well. And it seems within the last 30 years, because of changes in politics dealing more with morals, that the church increasingly getting involved in the political sphere and the administration of universities. But especially if you look at your uneasiness about that. And I just wish you could comment on that. Do you follow what I'm talking about?
I do, yeah.
Would you like to restate the question?
Okay. Generally, the question was, is there an uneasiness about the church's growing involvement in politics and in the governance of Catholic colleges and universities in light of, our democratic ideals and separation of church and state and such? All of these issues get into so many different other things. Yes, I think that's where very much of the fear is, and was even more in the 70s and late 60s when the Land O'Lakes Statement was issued. There was a real, genuine concern. At that time, if we recall, there were federal and Supreme Court cases coming down that were clearly seeming to indicate that the federal government was about to shut off any sort of federal support or accommodation for anything that smacked of religion. And these religious freedom tests were coming down, not in our favor. And so there was a sense that these college leaders that they needed to somehow retain a Catholic identity but separate from the church. And I think the big mistake there was, I put it in theological terms. I mean, we as individual Catholics know that our faith is sacramental. We cannot separate ourselves from the bishops, from the authority of the church, from the sacraments of the church, and still maintain a vibrant Catholic faith, no matter what we assent to personally. And I think the same thing has basically happened with Catholic institutions, and the church has made it clear that no matter how an institution is formed, no matter who's governing it, whether the bishops are involved, whether it's lay people, whether it's religious orders, it has to assent to the Catholic faith and to the authority of the magisterium. And in so doing, that makes it Catholic. So, but yes, I mean, there's definitely trepidation about, say, the bishops getting involved in governance. And the bishops have no intention of getting involved in the day-to-day governance. They have more than enough to deal with these days. But it's to, with regard to faith and morals, we have to respect the authority of the bishops. And unfortunately, I think there's a lot of disrespect for